Hello, this is Debbie Lynn Toomey, Tufts Medical Center's injury prevention professional, and you are watching Aging Strong, which is found under Health Links. Aging Strong is sponsored by the Quincy Health Department. And as you know, I love to invite great, amazing experts to talk about different topics that's relevant and important for older adults. And today I have Nicole McGurran, and she is the Programs and Services Director for the Alzheimer's Association. And she's here to talk about healthy living and focusing really on the brain health. So Nicole, welcome.
Thank you, Debbie, for having me.
Thank you. So before you I know you have a beautiful slide presentation to share with us, and I can't wait to learn more about brain health. Can you just share with the public what got you into this line of work, and more specifically on teaching people about Alzheimer's?
Sure. So I've been in this field for a really long time. My job in high school and in college was working as a nurse's aide in a nursing home, and I loved the residents who were living with Alzheimer's and dementia, and I loved and was inspired by how devoted their caregivers were to them. So I focused on gerontology when I was in college, and have worked in this field ever since. And I love the opportunity to teach people about brain health, Alzheimer's and dementia, caregiving. I think there's so many misconceptions out there about Alzheimer's and dementia and about how that affects people. I think there's a lot of hopelessness around and fear around this diagnosis, and particularly around this topic of brain health. I think is a great way to dispel some of those myths, but also give people some hope.
Yeah, very good. I mean, it's brain health is not just a way to prevent people from having Alzheimer's or dementia. It's really very important as we get older, right?
Absolutely. I would say that brain health is important at any age. You can start doing things. It's never too early or too late to start. But there's a lot of really encouraging research in the area of brain health. And right now, scientists are estimating that probably 40% of cases of Alzheimer's and dementia could be prevented or delayed by lifestyle factors that we're going to talk about today.
Oh, I can't wait to hear what you have to share.
So the title of this program is Healthy Living for the Brain and Body. And in today's program, as I indicated when I was talking to Debbie in the beginning, we are going to talk about how certain lifestyle factors can influence the health of our bodies as we age, and in particular, the brain, as we'll dive into a little bit more deeply. I would say probably the most important part of our body. And specifically, we're going to talk about sleep, smoking, mental health, physical activity, balanced nutrition, cognitive engagement, and social engagement. We're also going to mention another key important area, which I know Debbie knows lots about, which is in the area of head injury prevention as well, as a way to protect our brain as we age. So before we dive into some of those lifestyle factors, we are going to kind of level set, talk a little bit about the brain and Alzheimer's disease, and then take a dive into those different lifestyle factors. So the brain is the control center of the body, and it consists of over 100 million nerve cells that are called neurons that create a branching network. And the body sends signals to these different neurons, and that is how our body does everything from the most simple things to that we don't even think about, like breathing or our heart beating, to more complicated things like making decisions about our day-to-day life, to the feelings that we experience. There are many different diseases that do cause damage to these brain cells, and Alzheimer's is one of them. So we've known for a long time that the brain and the brain and the heart are connected, and this connection here is the center of a lot of the research looking at lifestyle factors and brain health. And we know it's important, and you'll hear this throughout the presentation, that doing things that protect your heart can help your brain to operate at its best. The brain cannot do what it needs to do without blood flow from the heart. And in particular, the heart is helping to supply our whole body with what it needs, with oxygen, to do what it needs to do. But it's sending a lot of that blood to the brain. In fact, it's estimated that 20 to 25% of the blood goes to the brain with each heartbeat. So there are a few quizzes in this presentation, and this first one is that Alzheimer's is a part of normal aging. So Debbie, what do you think?
I would have to say no.
No. Well, that is true that it is false. Alzheimer's disease is a progressive and fatal disease of the brain. It is something that starts very slowly. In fact, the damage in the brain starts before we even see symptoms, and it gets worse over time, and it's not a part of normal aging. So this program it does not dive super deeply into Alzheimer's and other dementias. It's a lot more about the health of the brain. But it is important to think a little bit about what Alzheimer's disease is and compared to dementia. And in my many years of working at the Alzheimer's Association, this question about what's the difference between Alzheimer's dementia and dementia is probably still the most common question that I get. And there's still a lot of confusion around that. So dementia is basically a general term that describes problems that people may have with thinking and memory that are severe enough that they interfere with your independence and your functioning. I like to say it's a category of diseases that cause these kinds of symptoms. It's not the specific disease itself. The most common cause of dementia is Alzheimer's disease. It accounts for 60 to 80% of all cases of dementia, and it is possible for people to have more than one type of dementia. One important point that I do want to bring up is that the Alzheimer's Association provides lots of support to people affected by Alzheimer's and all other dementia. Even though our name is the Alzheimer's Association, the services we provide, the research that we fund, the public policy that we advocate is for all types of dementia. Unfortunately, there is no cure for Alzheimer's disease at this point, although we are starting to see drugs emerge that actually slow the progression of those changes that happen in the brain. In addition, there's a growing body of research looking at what healthy behaviors may lower the risk of dementia. I do want to take time to mention just one quick thing about Alzheimer's, dementia, and normal aging. So we did that quiz. We know that Alzheimer's disease is not a part of normal aging, but we do know that some amount of cognitive decline is normal as we age, and it's things like taking longer to learn how to do something, or maybe it takes longer to find a piece of information in your thoughts, but you're able to find it eventually. It doesn't interfere with your independence. You know, if you're driving, if you're working, you should still be able to do those things even with that level of cognitive decline. But when we talk about some of these healthy behaviors, it is about reducing your risk of dementia. It's also about delaying that kind of cognitive decline and having your brain function to its highest ability as we age. Debbie, did you have any questions that you wanted to ask?
I do, actually. I wanted to not necessarily ask, but I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I do a lot of workshops for older adults. And after we're done with our interview, I'm going to be going to the Quincy Council of Aging to do a program on mindfulness. And just in general, a lot of the older adults that I do workshops for, they really, they strive to preserve their cognitive health, their brain health, you know, with memory and focusing and coordination. And so knowing that, you know, while Alzheimer's and dementia may not be a part of aging, there is going to be a certain amount of cognitive loss as we age. And a lot of people that I have done workshops for, they seem to have gotten to this level of acceptance. Other people, not yet, because they get frustrated. It's like, why can't I think, or why can't I focus as well as I did before? And why do I get distracted? And so, you know, having that level of knowing that is perhaps a part of aging and also maybe accepting it and working around it, just taking your time and just making yourself, you're giving yourself self-compassion for just doing your best. You know, just some of these little elements have been game changers for some of the people that I've just, been in front of.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And when we talk about these different lifestyle factors, again, taking those taking those into consideration, trying to incorporate those into your life, it is hopefully reducing your risk of dementia and Alzheimer's, but it is also maximizing, what your brain can do, despite having, some small but normal changes. And I think, one thing I often do to kind of put people at ease when we talk about this in presentations when I'm at a senior center like you are, is to remind people that cognitive decline starts pretty early. We all can see how kids learn things so much faster than even people in their 30s and 40s, and that is because their brain just functions differently. And as we age, it doesn't adapt quite as quickly to those new pieces of information. So it's just kind of a part that's kind of just a part of everyday life. And we do need to, but there are things we can do about it and not get discouraged by it. And it doesn't mean that, it doesn't mean that we absolutely have dementia. It doesn't mean that we're any less intelligent than we were before. We just need to figure out ways to make our brain work as best it can.
Thank you.
Sure. So we're also going to talk a little bit about our overall health to understand how these lifestyle factors kind of fit into improving brain health. So there are lots of different factors that impact our health and impact our health in particular as we age, including genes, family history, environment, and lifestyle. As we age, it's normal and common to experience certain changes like that small amount of cognitive decline, but also things like having, more trouble with vision, in particular close-up vision, having wrinkles, hair turning gray, those kinds of things are common changes that happen. But as individuals, there's a lot of difference in terms of how we get older. Some of this is due to our genes and our genetics and having certain, predisposition to diseases as we age. We also know that people's environment affects their health as they age, what kind of health care they have access to, what kind of food they have access to. So, with genes and family history and environment, we have some limited, some of that no control over and some limited control over. The encouraging thing is that we do have a lot of control over the lifestyle choices that we make and what we're going to talk about today, that in particular have a lot of positive impact for our heart health as well as our risk of developing Alzheimer's and dementia. So when thinking about our overall health, the first step in brain health is to work with your primary care physician to make sure that things like your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your weight, and your cholesterol are at the numbers that they should be. That is obviously going to be good for your brain, your cardiovascular health. It's going to be good for your risk of diabetes. It also seems like it will be good for your risk of developing Alzheimer's and other dementias. So as I was indicating before, really a lot of the focus on this research has been around cardiovascular disease and the risk of Alzheimer's and dementia. And I would say now it's probably been about 10 years ago, there was a very key study in this area that kind of kickstarted a lot of this lifestyle information that is now emerging. And that was looking at taking a really close look at blood pressure. And they basically compared people in terms of how rigorously blood pressure issues were treated, and had one group that was not treated as rigorously, but it still was within the guidelines, and then another group where they were really attacking blood pressure very rigorously to, even if it was just slightly high, they were providing medication, they were getting it into the optimal levels. And in the group that was rigorously treated, they did have lower risk of developing cognitive decline. over time. So that kind of really kickstarted this area of research. So the other issues that have been looked at closely are diabetes, as well as midlife obesity. And then again, because cholesterol plays such a huge role in cardiovascular health, that's another recommendation that is being made to make sure that those numbers are in good order. So we have another quiz here, which is that it's never too early or too late to incorporate healthy habits. What do you think, Debbie?
Oh, it's never too late. Never too
Yes.
late.
Yes, never too late and never too early. When people ask me about this program and say, who is this good for? And I say, anybody who has a brain at any age. We're all at risk, unfortunately, for developing Alzheimer's and dementia if we have a brain. And it's always important that we think about what these healthy behaviors are. And some of the decisions we make earlier on can impact our brain health, but there's also an ability to make some changes even if we start making changes in our later years. So the specific areas that we're going to talk about today are around sleep, smoking, mental health, getting moving, eating healthy, challenging yourself, and staying connected. Before we dive into that, I'm going to hit one more area that did not make this presentation. This presentation actually is being updated because we're getting so much great new information and just different ways to look at this. And one factor that is not included in this presentation is around head injury prevention. And we do know that having a serious head injury does increase your risk of developing Alzheimer's and dementia. So one thing that you can take some control over is doing your best to prevent those head injuries, wearing a seatbelt, wearing a helmet if you're biking, skiing, doing other dangerous things. If you have a head injury, taking it seriously and following the advice of doctors in treating that head injury. Is there anything as a nurse you'd like to add to that, Debbie? And I know that a lot of you do a lot of work around falls, which certainly is has a big risk factor for head injury as well.
Yeah. So, you probably know this already. As we get older, the size of our brain shrinks a little bit, just like, the parts of the muscles in our body. As we get older, some people say in the age of 40s, we start having muscle shrinkage. But as far as the brain goes, especially for older adults, as the brain mass itself shrinks a little bit. So, imagining the skull remaining the same because it's the bone, but then there's going to be greater mass in between the brain and also the skull. So when an older adult in particular, should happen to slip and fall, there's more like jostling around of the brain inside the skull. So, the bouncing back and forth, depending on how severe the head injury is or the fall, can really create such a bad brain bleed. And, for some people, they might think, oh, I'm okay. I got up. I'm fine. Truly, you have to be seen in the emergency room because you just never know. The repercussion can occur after like maybe a few hours or a day or 2 days. So definitely make sure you get checked. And a lot of older adults, they might be on blood thinners. Even more would put them at risk for a brain bleed. So, again, it's never too early to, start incorporating healthy habits by wearing helmets, if you're a biker, if you're, wearing seatbelts, as you mentioned, but older adults in particular, now that it's going to be, icy out there and snowy, be very careful and always protect your head, especially if you're falling. Try to, hold your head or kind of, protecting your head if you feel like you're about to fall.
That's a great point, Debbie. And I think, and for me, when I'm out there teaching this program in the community, to remember to remind people to take advantage of a lot of senior centers, libraries have great fall prevention programs because there's a lot you can do to prevent that fall from actually happening too. And how you can behave as you're falling, as you just pointed out, to reduce the risk of those injuries. But that's a really important factor to pay attention to at any age, and for your overall health, but in particular your risk of developing Alzheimer's and dementia.
Mm-hmm.
So the first lifestyle factor we're gonna think about is sleep. We know that sleep is important for our overall health and well-being, and it's recommended that adults get at least 6 hours of sleep per night. Um, Again, sleep, we all know that if we have a good night's sleep, we function better, we feel better, but it also actually affects our ability to maintain a healthy blood pressure, blood sugar, and, having inadequate sleep at any age can cause issues with your memory and your thinking. It's also important to keep in mind that, that there are also some medical conditions that impact how we sleep. Sometimes we're not even aware we have those medical conditions and aren't aware of how poor our sleep is. And those can often mimic Alzheimer's and dementia. That's how severe those symptoms with memory and thinking can be with some untreated sleep problems. So it's really important to pay attention to that. When thinking about in your own life, how to get quality sleep, some things to keep in mind are thinking about the kind of environment that is optimal for your personal sleep. Are there things you can do to create a more peaceful sleep setting? Are there things that you can do to minimize disruptions to your sleep? And then I would add to that things to keep in mind. Is it possible that you're having some kind of medical issues like sleep apnea or things like that are interfering with your sleep? And should you be talking to a doctor about how your sleep is? So some tips for getting good quality of sleep include controlling the temperature of the room and the amount of light you prefer, which is individual person to person. Although I went to a fascinating presentation by some sleep specialists at Yale a couple of months ago, and they did say in general, people do sleep better in a colder room. It's not the same for everybody, but in general, that's often something they suggest that people try. We've seen a lot of press and research around the impact of screens before bedtime and your ability to settle down and sleep. Are there some things, Debbie, that you would suggest to people think about to improving their sleep?
I was hoping you would ask. Because, I sometimes would struggle from sleep, not being able to fall asleep. So there's so much out there as far as sleep and really protecting your sleep. I do a presentation on sleep, and, I tell people sleep is one of those things that people forget about in terms of self-care. Because, a good quality sleep is going to impact all your decisions and how you relate to yourself and others during that day. But definitely the cool temperature, nice and dark, and setting a space for yourself in the evening to kind of start telling your mind and your body that you're transitioning to sleep, which means turning off the screens, not watching the news, not reading the newspaper, just allowing that time to be your time for yourself. And there are medications or supplements out there that people take, like melatonin. I'm not prescribing it, but it's out there. It's in the pharmacies, and melatonins are good. And people don't know that melatonin is something that can help them fall asleep, but not maintain their sleep. So there's different architectures out there to kind of help you with your sleep, depending on if you have a hard time falling asleep or if you wake up in the middle of the night and can't fall back to sleep. As far as caffeine, some people can sleep drinking coffee before they go to bed. Other people, they can't. I can't have caffeine after a certain time because it's going to impact my sleep. So it's another way for me to protect my sleep. So, stress management, that's also another thing to kind of think about. Some people do meditation, some people journal, some people read a book to quiet their mind. So there's just so much out there to help improve your quality of sleep. And there are going to be some medical conditions that you mentioned, like some people have enlarged prostate, so, I've done presentations for men, and, that's a big issue for them, getting up frequently at night. Some people have sleep apnea, like you said, and they don't even know that they have it, but their spouse, keeps saying they snore a lot and they kind of stop breathing for a few seconds. That should alert you, the person who could be suffering from that, to have maybe, a discussion with your primary care doctor and maybe have an at-home sleep study. So they have different variations now that you don't have to go to the hospital or to the sleep study clinic. They could send send you with a home sleep study, and then you would submit that. So that way the doctors can have an understanding of how your sleep is. So yeah, there's just so much out there. So thank you for giving.
Yeah, absolutely. So much out there. And there's some great experts on sleep. And there's so much that can be done. And lots of it doesn't involve medications at all, too, to be trying. So just, if you're having issues with sleep, do not suffer in silence. Reach out, talk to your doctor, get referred to a specialist, try some different things. There really are ways that people can make a difference, and the benefits are huge.
Yes.
Another area that's really important is around is smoking. Smoking, there's lots of impact on smoking on your overall health and of the health of your brain. Studies have shown that smoking may increase the risk of cognitive decline and dementia. The good news is that quitting smoking can reduce a person's chance of developing cognitive decline back to the level of non-smokers. And there's lots of promising research with lots of other health conditions that quitting really does have a massive impact on your likelihood of developing these health conditions. If you are a smoker and you're looking to quit, definitely thinking about what would help you stop smoking, what would help you stay smoke-free. And this is another area that I would say there are wonderful community resources available, both online, in person, that can help you to quit smoking. And it's, this is such a tough thing for people to tackle. And I would definitely urge people to take advantage of whatever is out there to help you to quit smoking. Because again, the benefits are going to be absolutely, absolutely huge. And you can certainly start by talking to your primary care physician, who I am sure, if this is an issue, is talking to you about this all of the time, and get referred somewhere. Mm-hmm. So we're going to shift a little bit to talking about mental health, which Debbie made some mention to. It's so related to sleeping. Lots of things that we do to help our sleeping, help our overall mental health. And it is very important to take care of your mental health, both to address any mental health concerns that you may have, but also just to manage your stress and make sure that you have time for self-care. So this includes paying attention to any symptoms that you might have of anxiety, depression, or other concerns. Those certainly can affect the health of your brain, and can also just affect the way that you can function cognitively. This is another area I talked about, how some sleep issues can cause cognitive symptoms so severe that they mimic Alzheimer's and dementia. The same is true of depression. Severe untreated depression can cause cognitive symptoms that look just like Alzheimer's and dementia, and they're not. They are simply untreated depression. So it's really important to take care of of mental health. And many of the healthy habits that we're going to talk about throughout this program do help your mental health as well. I think having good mental health makes it easier to do things like exercise and stay socially engaged, and then it goes the opposite way too. So some things to keep in mind in terms of your mental health include, in addition to, again, taking seriously any serious symptoms that you are concerned that you have, but in terms of making sure that, you're managing stress, that you're taking care of yourself, making sure that thinking about what kinds of things you enjoy doing and figuring out how you can build breaks into your day to allow you to do those things, and or maybe some changes you can make to make time for those kinds of activities. And I would say self-care is something that varies so much for every person. I worked with a wonderful social worker for many years, and she used to call self-care, figuring out ways to do things that give back energy to yourself in your life. Like what do you do that when you are done, some of it's about feeling relaxed, but some of it is about feeling rejuvenated. I think you need a combination of those kind of activities activities in your life. It's and that is going to be different for each individual person. A couple of years ago, I worked with a caregiver who was providing 24/7 care to his wife who had Alzheimer's disease. And when we talked about his self-care, talking about something individual, he said to me, you know, the housework, taking care of her doesn't stress me out. He's like, I feel good that I'm doing this. He said, but what I need to be able to do that, he's like, I need time to continue to play adult hockey with my guy friends. He's like, that's what I want respite care for, so that twice a week I can go do that. He's like, I don't need the other stuff you can send me, kind of thing. And that's what we were able to find for him. And that did make a real difference for him to get a break, to do something that energized him, to do something that was really different kind of from his day to day. So it's very different for each person. Debbie, would you like to mention anything else? You talked a little bit about, about journaling, things like that. I'm sure you have some other ideas in the area of self-care.
Oh yeah, so much, so much. And as you mentioned, it's different for everybody, right? And as you were talking, actually, I was thinking about when I used to work 12-hour shifts at the bedside as a nurse, and knowing that, we have a lack of staff, patients are very sick, and there's going to be little time for me to have my actual break. So one of my self-care is just to I start humming sometimes and start singing a song. And sometimes I would, if somebody that I know likes to hum along with me, I would just sit next to that person, and we start start singing and having this a chorus type funny thing happening at the nurse's station. But it made us feel good. It made other people who were walking by, they gave us some looks sometimes they sang along, but it just provided that micro moment of respite. Mm-hmm. And it gave us, it made us laugh. It made us sing, there's, right in the middle singing a song, but it just nothing like music therapy, right? In the midst of a busy day. So yeah, that's one of the things. But I think what I would love to just share is just self-care is going to be different at different stages in our life, and no matter what we're doing. So if you can just grab something like a micro moment of something that can either make you feel restored, relaxed, or rejuvenated, go for it.
Absolutely. And I would say it's a combination of things. It's about having time for activities you enjoy and energize you, but it's also about figuring out some little things throughout the day too. I like that term, the of micro moments. And I think in particular, micro moments are really important for people who are caring for someone who has Alzheimer's and dementia, who really do have a tough job. It doesn't end, but trying to figure out some creative ways to do that. And whether that is while your loved one is watching a TV show, that you call a friend, or you watch a funny video on your phone, whatever that happens to be, that those are important. Those are important things to be doing for yourself. So the next area we're going to talk about is the area of physical exercise. And I will say one of the great privileges that I have at the Alzheimer's Association is getting a chance to meet and work with lots of leading researchers and doctors in the field of Alzheimer's and dementia. And every single one of them will say, if you're going to do one thing of these lifestyle factors, you should pay attention to your physical exercise. There's lots of encouraging research, just like there is in the area of cardiovascular health and exercise, that exercise reduces the risk of cognitive decline and of developing Alzheimer's and dementia. It seems as though physical activity does benefit brain cells in terms of improving that cardiovascular health, ensuring an adequate blood flow to the brain to be able to do the things that it can do. The research on exactly what type of physical exercise is the best is actually getting fine-tuned. There's lots in this area, but it does seem to be, I think the most promising area is around the area of doing some kind of regular, vigorous cardiovascular exercise that increases your heart rate. But at the same time, there are also research on more gradual and gentle type of exercise and your health, and those have benefits as well. So really, the most important thing to do is figure out some way that you can increase movement in your day, in a safe way for whatever other health conditions that you might be experiencing. And somewhat things to think about if you are looking to increase the movement in your life, or maybe you've started some good habits and you want to make sure that you continue with those, are trying to find things that you enjoy doing. If you enjoy doing it, you're going to be a lot more likely to do it regularly. Figuring out if you can build it into your regular day. Debbie talked a little bit about that with mental health. You can do the same thing with physical activity. You can decide to park a little farther away from the grocery store. If you have a pet, you can kind of structure into your day that you are going to do a walk in the morning and at night or whenever that is. And then thinking about whether there are ways to involve other people in your exercise, because again, that also increases the likelihood that you're going to be doing it, makes it more enjoyable, and tends to have some greater benefits. So I do encourage people, if this is something new to you, definitely it's okay to start small. You can think about, well, how am I going to add up the different pieces of physical movement throughout my day to add that for some benefit? Think about whether you want to have some family members join you, whether you want to sign up for a class, those kinds of things. I will say I'm very fortunate. One of the reasons that I stay as physically active as I do is I do have a group of other moms, and we have been running and hiking together for about 10 years. We have a little text group, and every single day somebody will say, will you meet me at this time? And I will tell you, and we all have very busy lives, so it's often, can you meet me at 5:45? And if you're going to have a chance to see 2 or 3 people that you really enjoy their company, that gets you out the door. Much more likely than if you were to get up in the dark and go out on your own. So I think that makes a real big difference. Debbie, is there something that you do that you have found helps you to keep to a routine of getting exercise?
Well, I love walking, and I love how you said, and the slide here, it says physically active.
Yeah.
Sometimes people get turned off by it with the word exercise.
Yes.
So getting physically active is so important, and even doing your house chores
Yep.
is physically, being physically active. So going up and down the stairs, and you mentioned parking away from the entrance. I do that all the time. And, some people would ask me, why are you parking so far away? Because I need my steps. I need to get my steps in. But I love how you have your walking group, though, because you become each other's accountability buddy. And it's so important. And, I love to walk, and I love to walk with my husband when he's around. I love to walk with my kids if they're around, because sometimes things come up as you're walking. It's a nice way to kind of relate and listen and, and just be with somebody that you care about. So love it. Walking is so cheap.
Walking is cheap. The other thing I will say on the opposite end of cheap that I think helps with exercise for some people too. I also do belong to a gym, and when I sign up for a class, if I don't show up to it, I get a little charge for not going. It's a big encouragement to me. I can't stand the idea of paying for something that I didn't do.
Yeah.
So some people complain about that. I actually like that. So, but I think knowing that something is scheduled at that time, and a lot of seniors I work with, go to classes at the senior center, and again, they know it's at a specific time, and if they don't go, they're going to miss it, and that certainly can be encouraging as well.
Yeah, can I just add one thing? So
Yeah.
For older adults who are interested in starting some sort of a physical activity, just make sure that, I like to say, just make sure you're okay, you're physically healthy, and you get the approval of your primary care provider. And make sure that you pick something that is that suits your activity level at that moment, and build up. Don't all of a sudden join a pickleball game and then think I can't do this. This is too much, because you can get hurt for one thing, and then you're not setting yourself up for success. So just be careful and set yourself up for success.
Yes, great point. So shifting gears a little bit to the area of eating healthy. And again, this is another area we see lots of things in the news about this, about how eating well can reduce your risk of lots of different diseases. In particular, again, this goes back to that theme of what's good for the heart is good for the brain. So thinking about eating a diet that is going to reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease, or if you have it, help to treat that. I think about, and also just I think in your mind, mentally thinking about what I am eating is fueling my brain. I think having that, just eating with that intent in mind and keeping that in mind when you're just making decisions about choices is important. And again, there's been research around balanced diet and heart disease, cancer, Parkinson's, stroke, diabetes, and lots of other diseases. This is an area that I think we're going to see a lot of more specific research come out in terms of brain health. At this point, the kinds of recommendations that we make are a little bit general. And I will say diet is a super tricky thing to study. It is not like studying a medication that was created in a lab and putting it into a study. So many things impact even, the apple that you eat, where it was grown, all these other things. There's just a lot of factors with diet that you cannot study it in such a controlled way. So it is a tricky area. And there's lots that comes out there. One week you'll hear blueberries are great for cognitive decline. Another is spice. So you kind of got to read this and I don't know, do the best you can, eat the most healthy you can, but also remember that, again, it's a tough area to study. And the answer is not going to be one kind of food makes the difference. It's about diet, not about specific foods necessarily. So the two diets that have gotten the best press, and then when there are studies about older adults and cognitive decline, these are generally the two diets that will be recommended, are the DASH diet, which is a diet that is recommended when people have high blood pressure, as well as a Mediterranean diet. And there are lots of similarities between these two diets. There's an emphasis on fruits and vegetables. There's whole grains, nuts and beans, and lean meats and fish and protein to get your protein, looking at healthier fats, and definitely limiting the amount of sugar and salt. When thinking about eating healthy, some things to keep in mind include, are there ways you can cook the food you like a little differently to make it healthier? Can you cook something instead of with butter, with olive oil, those kinds of decisions? Are there some healthier foods that you can swap in? Maybe you love rice and maybe a couple days a week, instead of having white rice, you can have brown rice, those kinds of substitutes. And are there some new foods that you are willing to try? Some other tips to think about in terms, especially cooking style, thinking about using spices and particularly sodium-free spices instead of salt when flavoring. Are there things, I think, taking an attitude of adding in rather than taking away? And this is a trick I use with my family who love their carbs, in a family of guys who have metabolisms that everybody would envy. So I don't try to take away the carbs, and they love their regular pasta, but instead I will serve, 2 vegetables. Instead of just one, or I'll add a fruit in there for the meal, kinds of things. So instead of, again, taking that away, I put more things into the diet that are healthy, is something to think about. Other things that you have a tip you would give in terms of healthy eating, Debbie? I think this is the trickiest. I will admit this is the trickiest one for me, and I think it's the trickiest one for lots of people.
Yeah, definitely very, very tricky because, just from what I've seen, there's so many different conflicting diets out there. Do this, and then another researcher will say, no, if you do that, then you'll end up with this. So it's very, very tricky. But I love how you mentioned, healthy fats like the olive oils, and also, just increasing your roughage, fruits and vegetables, and keeping in mind that food is medicine. Food is medicine. So if we can kind of think about that, and hopefully that's going to help us kind of like stop and think about what we're eating. And if we still decide, okay, I have no budget, I can only afford McDonald's, or I can only afford this. Unfortunately, that's real for a lot of people, right? Yeah. Because of accessibility and budget. But maybe instead of having, like a Diet Coke, which is really worse for you than the regular Coke, maybe opting for water, bringing your water. And maybe instead of having, the fries, maybe choosing an apple. So you're still having, some of the flavors and the affordability, but maybe making, a slight change in what you're choosing to accompany with, with the food that you're choosing, hopefully would help. And
I
just
think
one
for a
last,
lot of people to think about that too with this diet, I think a lot of times when you think I got to overhaul everything, and
yeah.
whether that's tough because of what you like to eat culturally, what you have access to financially, where you live, what
Mhm.
there are lots of reasons why that's overwhelming to people. But
Yeah.
to think about what can you do, make some small differences, and
Mhm.
those do add up, and they are important, and make some improvements. I would say for seniors in particular, I would
Mhm.
just take advantage of the fact there are some great nutrition programs out there, and
Mhm.
all of the Meals on Wheels programs and the meal sites at senior centers, they all have a dietitian who works with them. And one of the other services you can use is if you ask, is talking to that dietitian about some changes that you might be able to make. So definitely to take advantage of that, because there are some creative ways that can
Mhm.
be done, keeping in mind your budget, your health concerns, your likes and dislikes, but
Mhm.
not hesitate to reach out for some help in that area because it's a tough one
Mhm.
for lots
Yep.
of reasons.
Yep. Mhm.
I'm going to take a moment to do a little, I would say this is an Alzheimer's Association commercial around vitamins and supplements, which comes into this diet area. So, the Alzheimer's Association does go along with the World Health Organization's advice in that vitamins and supplements are not recommended to reduce the risk of cognitive decline and dementia. At this point, there is no research to support any particular vitamins or supplements and the risk of cognitive decline and dementia. I will say there are studies looking at this, so this advice might change if research does prove this, but at this point, that is not the case. And there is, I will say though, these companies that do this have a lot of funding for a lot of ads, so you see them all the time. Just to be aware that again, there's not any research behind those. Those vitamins and supplements are not. They're not regulated by the FDA, and we do recommend instead to focus on balanced nutrition as a way to both make sure you're eating healthy, but also hopefully reduce your risk of cognitive decline. And if you do have a health concern or there's a reason why you're worried about you might need vitamins or supplements for your diet, to talk to a doctor or dietitian about that, to make sure what you're taking doesn't interfere with any other conditions you have, but also to make sure you're taking the right ones. Not all vitamins, even that have the same name, were created equally. So you want to make sure if you're spending your money on that, you're getting the right one. So just and if you are taking any of these, when you go to the doctor, if you're at the emergency room, include those in your list of medications that you're telling healthcare physicians about. So the next area that we're going to talk about begins with a quiz, and this is the last quiz. So challenging your brain may help lower your risk of cognitive decline. What do you think, Debbie?
I'd say true.
That one is true.
Mm.
Continuing to challenge our minds as we age may lower the risk of cognitive decline. So it is around, I will say, challenging yourself. So when we talk about this area, we aren't talking about doing, like years ago, when I first got into this field, there was a lot of talk about crossword puzzles and doing those to treat Alzheimer's disease, prevent it. We had lots of stressed caregivers worried that the person they were caring for wasn't doing the crossword puzzles. And it's not about one specific thing. And it's not about, and in particular with crossword puzzles, for people that are really good at them, they might be a great way to reduce your stress and to do things you enjoy, but they're not challenging your brain anymore. So it is about doing things that develops those new pathways in the brain. And that seems to have impact for both how you're functioning right now and your short-term cognitive decline, but also over time. And it is about keeping your mind active and challenged. And there seems to be also a lot of promising research in the area of engaging in structured ongoing learning. So it's a combination between what you can be doing on your own, learning something new, but also engaging in some kind of structured learning. Um, Again, it is about developing some of those new pathways in the brain so that, if you are having some damage happening, your brain cells have another option of how to connect to do the things we want it to do. Cognitive engagement does encourage blood flow to the brain, which we've talked about being very important. And again, there's a lot of research in the area. People who are engaged in formal education do tend to do better in terms of their risk of developing dementia. Some things to keep in mind when making sure that that cognitive engagement is a part of your lifestyle is thinking about if there are new things hobbies you want to have, skills you want to learn. Again, just like with physical exercise, it is about finding things that you would enjoy, that are fun for you, that you enjoy. You're going to be a lot more likely to do those kinds of things. Some ways to find cognitive engagement, are things like taking a class at your local college or community center. A lot of those do have, especially for seniors, discounts, or you can go audit classes for free. You can incorporate it into your regular day, trying a new cooking technique. If you are, one of the things I like to do to challenge myself, I'm a knitter. I will say I knit easy things as my stress management. And in terms of my challenging, I like to sometimes pick out something new that's hard that I have to watch videos, try, redo to be able to learn how to do them. Sometimes people try learning a new language. That's a great new challenge, even if it's tough and maybe you're getting to a point you're not great at it, but that's a great way to challenge your brain, and maybe you're not fluent in it, but you're better than you were when you started, that you can see some improvement. Also finding I joked a little bit about crossword puzzles, but puzzles and games are a way. There are lots of different types of games like chess or things where it changes every time and you're forced to think in a new way. Are there things, Debbie, that you try to do to make sure your brain stays challenged?
I do love taking classes. I'm an avid learner. So something that's going to stimulate my brain, especially if it has to do with health and well-being. I eat them all up. I love it. I love it because it helps me take care of myself, and whatever I learn, I love to share with others. So taking classes.
Yeah, definitely taking classes. The other thing I do in terms of learning, I was thinking that I work into my everyday, is I do love podcasts. And I often will pick things. I try to say yes to things that maybe are outside of my usual listening. I can still remember one of the most fascinating things I listened to once was a story about the history of parking. Who would know? It made me think so much. I learned things I never thought of before. So I do try to say, when the next episode comes on, even if it's something that doesn't grab me right away, to try listening to it, to get me to learn new things and think about the world in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So the final area we're going to talk about is in the area of staying socially connected, which does seem to have lots of different health benefits, including our cognitive health and our risk of developing Alzheimer's and dementia. There's lots of research in the area of, people who are socially engaged tend to live longer and have fewer disabilities. We also know that people who are connected to others, who spend time with other people, tend to make healthy choices in other areas of their life. Some things to keep in mind to either increase your connections or to stay connected, or to think about, how do I like to stay connected to others? For some people, it is about that face-to-face kind of interaction, and there's a certain amount of that they need in their life to feel connected. Other people do appreciate their time alone, and maybe they spend less time together, but they make sure that they check in, they have phone calls, they text. There are different ways to stay connected. Also thinking about, are there opportunities, especially if you feel like you're lacking in those connections, you're new somewhere, thinking about ways that you can become involved in your community, whether that's through volunteering or if there are clubs or groups that you would like to join to get you interacting with other people. And again, keeping in mind things you enjoy, causes that are important to you with volunteering. For some people, it is about, having some regular ways to keep in touch. And I know my grandmother and her siblings, they have a weekly, they're in their 90s. They still talk every night. They just have a quick phone call at 7 o'clock each day. And that's a way that they stay connected, even though, they're not able to get out as much as they used to. So those are important things to do. So kind of to wrap this up, the areas that we've talked about today are in the area of to reduce your risk of cognitive decline and dementia and Alzheimer's include preventing head injury or treating it if you have it, if you end up having one, getting good quality sleep, not smoking, taking care of your mental health, getting moving, eating well, challenging yourself mentally, and staying connected with others. And I will say these are all very interrelated to one another. And many of the things, lifestyle choices you can make benefit lots of areas. We gave a couple of examples. I know one of them in the area of staying physically active. If you're going for a walk and you're doing that with other people, and you're not just you're getting the physical exercise benefit, you're getting the social benefit, you're helping to take care of your mental health because you're getting a chance to talk about what's going on in your life. And you're most likely getting that exercise, which is going to help your sleep that night. So there's these kind of these choices that we make don't kind of live in their own vacuum. And I think if you can make, and you're going to be a lot more likely to do these healthy choices if they involve multiple areas as well. So to really think about that when you're thinking about making some changes. And do want to emphasize, like I think we've emphasized a couple of times, so that it's okay to start small. Any kind of improvement that we're able to make is going to have a benefit. And again, I think you're going to be more likely to continue with those healthy habits if you don't make it overwhelming to begin with. Is there anything overall you would like to add, Debbie? And then I would love to just mention some support services from the Alzheimer's Association.
No, I thought this was such a great presentation. I love how you touched upon so many different elements from sleep and smoking and mental health. It's, there's so much we could do to improve our brain, our body. And I think for people to just kind of pick one based on you've got this really great list of 7. And, it might take a person to say, okay, I'm going to start with sleep. It may not happen overnight, literally speaking, but, just pick one and then work with your primary care provider to see how you can improve upon that particular element and then move on to the next. So just set yourself up for success. So that way you're in that trajectory of healthy brain and body.
Absolutely. So I did want to just mention to people before we wrap up this formal presentation is that the Alzheimer's Association has lots of supports out there. So if you're watching this and you have a question about something that we didn't get to, we have a wonderful 24/7 helpline at 800-272-3900. There are experts available anytime, day or night, in more than 200 languages. They can help with questions that you might have about this presentation, or maybe you read something in the paper about something that said it prevented Alzheimer's disease. They're also there if you're a caregiver for someone with Alzheimer's and you have some challenge. Maybe you're trying to figure out whether someone's safe to keep driving. Maybe you're worried about your own memory issues. You don't know, does it feel like normal aging, or is it something I should be worried about? And anything in between, please give us a call. We can help with all of those different issues. There are lots of resources on our website about brain health, research, caregiving, anything related to Alzheimer's and dementia. And we also have a great database called Community Resource Finder on that website, where if people are looking, for a home care agency, a neurologist in their area, you can find resources in your local community for those different needs that you might have. And Debbie, did you have anything else you wanted to add, or any other questions that you wanted to talk about?
Actually, I just wanted to, I know we're at the top of the hour. I just wanted to, let you know, this was such a great presentation and very comprehensive. And I love how the Alzheimer's Association is not just for people, I think you mentioned this in the beginning, not just for people who think they might have Alzheimer's or who are dealing with Alzheimer's, but any aspects of dementia you mentioned, right? So I just wanted to make sure that people remember that. And, such a robust association and provides so much for not only the person suffering with that disease, but also the caregivers who are, suffering just as much, if not
Yeah.
more, so.
Absolutely. And it just don't, I would say to people all the time, anybody who's called our helpline usually says, I wish I had called sooner. So don't wait if you have questions, concerns, you need support. And again, doesn't matter what type of Alzheimer's or dementia someone has. It doesn't matter if you're just worried about your memory and you don't have a formal diagnosis. And I will say, and you don't need to have a question. If you are willing to talk to us and answer some questions we have, I think we'll be able to give you some guidance in whatever issue you're confronting. So don't hesitate to reach out.
What a great way to end. Thank you so much, Nicole. I appreciate your time with us and, sharing your knowledge. I also want to thank the Quincy Health Department for continuing to sponsor Aging Strong. So until next time, everybody, take care and stay healthy.